Pod of Exiles, welcome to the inaugural Pod of Exile, a group of us Mobalytics-centric creators gathered around to talk about Path of Exile 2. This podcast is juiced by Mobalytics, much like the towers are juicing all of our maps in Path of Exile 2 right now. Hopefully that'll change sometime soon. All these guys have great guides over on Mobalytics. They have, videos hosted there. They have their character builds and all the rest. A lot of good work has gone on that site. And they have decided to sponsor a community podcast, which is awesome. Thank you so much to Mobalytics. But that's enough plugging. Let's get into the thick of it because we are almost 4 long months into Path of Exile 2's early access period. And I wanted to say much has happened, but the truth of the matter is not much has actually occurred in the world of Path of Exile, neither Path of Exile 1 or Path of Exile 2. The talk of the street has been, what is going on with Path of Exile? When is the next big update going to hit? And we actually just found out. April 4th, and that has a lot of drama in it to it, which we'll discuss in good time. But before we discuss 0.2, Dawn of the Hunt, Last Epoch, and all that, I want to get the street cred of all of these Path of Exile 2 content creators. Okay, I want to see how many hours they have in the game, how many characters they've played, right? We need to understand everyone's perspectives here before we hop into this first discussion. I've talked to all these guys pretty recently, but the person I haven't talked to in the longest time has been Lolcohol. I think I chatted with you right after launch. Lolcohol, how did your Path of Exile 2 journey end up going? I don't know if it's ended yet. I don't know if you're like fully back in Path of Exile 1 or what, but let us know.
No, it's been good. I mean, the game, we all know that there's problems, but I've been really enjoying it. I went back to PoE 1 for Freesia for a couple of weeks. Now I'm back on PoE 2. After they announced those race events, I've been practicing for that, and that's been super fun. Because it's just like you're in the campaign the whole time, right? Which is like the good part of the game. So, in terms of street cred, number of characters, hours played, I don't know. I deliberately did not use Steam so that I wouldn't have an answer to that question. What counts as a character? Like a character that made it to endgame?
Yeah, let's say made it through Cruel. How about that?
Made it then I don't know. I've got like two like softcore characters in the 90s, and then I went through hardcore, got a character 75 or something, and then got bored, and now it's just been race practice. So
okay,
I don't know, 3.
I'd classify you as a
like
blaster.
50.
Pretty good. 3's good.
I'm getting there, slowly but surely.
And you've been practicing for the races. Do you think you could snag a demigods next week or this week, tomorrow?
No, not at all. I'm like many weeks behind, right? So the times I'm getting now, I'm looking at the race 1 leaderboards. I'm like, okay, I'm like there, but those guys are all like, they've had many weeks ahead practice. But I'm doing it for fun. I'm really enjoying it and learning a lot doing it. So yeah, PoE 2 racing. If you want to play, but you don't want to play the end game, get into that. It's good.
And I guess we can plug the Campaign Codex Discord right now. I'll put it in the description. You guys have been doing some awesome work with map layouts there too, right?
Thank you. Yeah. We've been looking. Taking screenshots of a whole lot of areas in the campaign, trying to like condense it down and figure out any clues that there are. So for people who are worried about the campaign being too long or too like the areas, once you understand the areas and the layouts, they feel so much smaller. They feel huge. Like everyone complained, layouts are too big. They're too big. But once you actually get a grip on them, it suddenly just shrinks them down. So anyone interested? Yeah, click the link. Got a Discord full of really cool people.
Awesome. You will never convince me that the Drowned City is a small map, though. It's just not going to happen.
It's tiny. Tiny.
And I know it's an obvious route, too. You just follow, like, the road, either to the ziggurat with the forge guy, or just to, is it the Apex of Filth, right? It's so simple, but it feels so large. I think it's the hags. I really do.
The hags. Just
they slow me down. They slow me down. Okay, Lolcohol, thank you so much for that cred. Let's hop over to Sirgog. Are you a racer like Lolcohol, or have you been taking a different approach to Path of Exile 2 the past few months?
No, I've not gotten even the basics of racing down pat. Like I am as far from the elite racers as a first-time player is from me. Like I'm basically could not do the Doriani race in under 6 hours. Not a chance. and
Me too.
that's not even remotely close to a competitive time.
And how have you been enjoying Path of Exile 2 so far? Did you get a few characters into the end game? Did you focus on just one character? And how has that time been so far in your eyes?
So I started out with a character that didn't work as well as I'd originally hoped it might. And that actually found that was a lot of fun trying to force it to get better and just trying to push through with something that clearly wasn't something hyper optimized. That's something I tend to like doing a fair bit because you feel like there's a section of the player base that follow guides and there's a section of the player base that don't. It gives you a good sense as to exactly what the experience is of that section of the player base that don't, if you're playing something that feels a bit scuffed. So that was the Blood Mage that I started. That's most of the hours that I've played. I don't know the number of hours because if I was going to do slash played, the problem that comes up there is that you pick up all of the time that you're idling, where like I might be editing a video,
Yeah.
but I have the game open and I'm trading occasionally. I'm occasionally just sort of getting sidetracked from working on a video and then I alt tab into the game, go run a map or two. And so there's all that sort of stuff that's going on. Most recently, in terms of research projects, I did a whole bunch of experiments when it came to currency flipping on the exchange. Not really with an intention of it being something that would make a lot of currency, but looking for things that were good for someone that's trying to go from, say, 30 chaos orbs. I'll come back to chaos orbs and exalted orbs later,
Oh
where
yeah.
I'm talking in chaos rather than exalts. But someone that starts with 30 chaos and is looking to have, say, 15 divines. What's the most efficient way to do that? So I've been doing a number of little experiments along those sorts of lines over time as well.
That sounds very interesting, especially with point two coming up. I'm just so curious, and I feel like I got to Path of Exile 1 pretty late, so I was never really curious on the economy aspect. But with PoE 2, I feel like I'm allowed to witness how it's going to evolve from the outset, and it's going to be so interesting to see what everybody gravitates toward, what the pricing is going to be, what the currency exchange market is going to do, being in every single realm or league, just as a mechanic that's in it to the game. It's going to be so interesting. Do you have any early crackpot theories? We can talk about it more later. Do you have any theories on the economy in point two? Any big predictions?
Let's just say that, I mean, obviously things can change just depending upon what gets announced. Like if they had some sort of new crafting system, then that might change things. I got this feeling like I know some of the previous planning they talked about, they were thinking of having single item slot crafting mechanics though. So in the way that at the moment in the game, catalysts only work on certain slots. Um, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw something like a crafting system that lets you really deterministically make awesome gloves, but that just doesn't work on any other slot.
Yeah.
Is if that happens, that's not going to change things much. My vibe though is that I think the Exalted Orb standard is dead, and that really it was patch 0.1.1 that killed it. But the player base took a long time to realize, and that's the reason that we saw. I think during the week after that patch came out, Exalt to Divine ratio went from 80 to 240, and then from 240 to now, last time I checked it was like 750, 800. Basically, no one wants Exalts, or sorry, that's not quite correct. People want Exalts, but
Yeah.
they only want the ones they pick up enough themselves,
Right.
much like Regal Orbs in both games.
Mhm.
Regal Orbs are like, they're genuinely a really useful currency, but they're pretty much worthless in trade because everyone's self-sustaining them.
Watching that whole fiasco unfold was just hilarious because I thought I was selling off my divines at the high of like 368, and I logged in the next day and they're like hitting 650. I'm like, oh my gosh, dang it. Yeah,
I
I
was expecting them to hit 600 faster than they did, honestly.
really crazy. It'll be really interesting to see if you're right on that prediction with chaos orbs and everything, because I do feel the same way. I feel like I'm always sustaining X, especially in endgame, and even sometimes in the campaign. Like if you're killing all the rares, I feel like they drop pretty darn often. At least on my playthroughs on hardcore now. I've been practicing that. All right, and finally, just for the intros, Dreamcore. I talked to you pretty recently, man. Have you continued your exciting foray into leveling a bunch of Pee-wee characters and Pee-wee 2
I haven't been
characters?
playing PoE2 recently.
Okay.
I stopped playing a while back because I was just completely burned out of it, but Yeah, I leveled like 7 or 8 characters to the end of the campaign. Lots of different classes, lots of different builds. I think the campaign is by far the best part of the game right now. It's not even close. Like the end game is just very poor in comparison, and the campaign's great. But yeah, I mean, I'm hyped to get back into PoE too. Been wanting to play it. It's just that usually when you kind of hit that burnout period, you need something fresh to bring you back and to get you excited again, for the game. So that's what I'm waiting for. Waiting for the big reveal.
What an excellent segue, Dreamcore. You're just fantastic at these. I have one character that I got to endgame, and I've played almost 300 hours in the game just for my little cred. Not a ton of cred, but I've played quite a bit, considering I usually only play Path of Exile 1 League for about 75, 80 hours, and then I'm burnt out. So I'm actually pretty surprised I played that long. But as for something that's going to bring us all back into the game, I'll just open it up, you guys. We obviously have the teaser for PoE 0.2, the very first major content patch of early access, Dawn of the Hunt. We know two things for sure that are coming that are big ticket items: the Huntress as a class and the Spear. Okay, and I guess some Ascendancies are coming as well. Those are big ticket. What's exciting to you guys? What other predictions do you have? Like, let's hear it. Let's hear them roll out. See who's brave.
I don't think there's going to be any druid.
Oh,
Dude,
really?
what are you talking about? Okay, give me your justification.
So, okay,
go for it.
Right.
I'll fight you.
It depends if GDG have got the balls to make a teaser without the druid and then drop the druid in the full reveal. Like, I don't know if they're up to par with that thing, right? The thing that everybody wants is the druid, right? The huntress is great, but the druid is like the one that everybody's clamoring for. They're like, just give me the druid. So I think that they would tease the druid for the big reveal and then be like, oh, and here's the huntress as well, and not the other way around. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the druid is coming. I don't know.
Or I
They
fight
might
him.
do it exactly the other way around, right? Where everyone's like,
I hope
no
so.
Druid,
I hope I'm wrong.
And then they're like,
Yeah.
here's the druid. We could wake up on Monday and they just like give another little teaser. I'm hopeful.
I don't think we're going to get any teasers. It's either going to be in the reveal or not.
You
Like,
reckon? Yeah.
It's too big of a feature. Like, they're not just going to tease that.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, the main thing I'm really hoping for is a better end game, because the end game is.
Oh yeah.
It's.
Yeah.
Do you think a lot is going to go into that, guys? Do you really think?
I think it will be their primary focus. I hope so, because look, the campaign experience for the most part is really, really good, and playing hardcore and like struggling to get to end game was really enjoyable. The moment I hit end game, it was just like, it's so. Like, there's so much friction that it's
the word you're looking for is bad.
Bad, yes. Poto endgame bad. So
it is. Like, I'm sorry, it just, in comparison to PoE 1, like, it really is not good. The end game it's in a bad place. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, what do you think they're gonna add? Try, if you're surprised that I said that.
To endgame, I think they're going to focus on adding new skills. I think there's going to be 2 classes, and I think there's going to be 1 new act. I really do.
Really?
That's my, and I don't think a lot's going to go into the end game. I mean, maybe they'll add a few mechanics, right? Maybe they'll pour, bestiary and maybe 1 other smaller mechanic the size of ritual. But I don't think they're putting a ton of focus into the end game. I almost feel like that initial tower teaser cemented that fact. Like, they're showcasing, here's what we're doing with towers. We're just making them into maps.
Oh my God.
I don't think they're going to be doing a ton of work on that front. Maybe they'll add new encounters that you need to do to clear the maps, and it won't just be a rare hunter, because that's one of my least favorite things. But I don't think they're going to be doing a lot of work there. Gog, do you agree, or are you on their side with the end game focus?
Well, let's just firstly start with Act 4. Can you bring up the teaser, for the 0.2.0 teaser thread? There's a unique item in there, the Deepest Tower. This is the reason that I think that Act 4 is probably here. If you bring up that particular item, you'll notice that it is a Spirit Bone Crown base.
Right.
This is an Act 4 themed base. And they did say in a couple of the things originally that they're going to be introducing acts alongside the items that are tied to them. Now, they might have decided to go back on that. They might have decided, okay, we need to have more itemization at endgame. We're not going to call this an advanced whatever base it is now.
Right.
The level 45 armor energy shield helmet that exists in the game, which is something advanced at the moment. They're not going to make it that. They're just going to put in the Spirit Bone helm for that. So it's not absolutely certain, but I definitely feel like Act 4 is reasonably likely. Now, with that in mind, and Grinding Gear Games' past practice, I think there's one possibility is that the reason 020 is as late as it is they've decided, right, we're just going to get Acts 4, 5, and 6. I don't think that's likely, but I do think it's possible. And otherwise, though, I'm pretty sure they're going for Act 4, and then they have to figure out how to make Cruel work out. Now, if that's the case, if they've got 2 classes, as I suspect is probably the case, and on top of 2 classes, they also have a bunch of ascendancies, then in that case, I can see them going, all right, what's the minimum we can do to the end game to make it go from like 4 out of 10 to 6 out of 10? Whereas a thoroughgoing rework to try and make an 8 or 9 out of 10 system is going to probably be a 1.0.0 in my mind.
And what do you guys think are the largest problems with the endgame? Everybody already constantly talks about towers and how they just add so much time necessary to like proper invest into maps. You know how people like they want to run the bad maps around the towers, and then they use the towers to juice the good maps around the towers, then they can finally run those maps and all that stuff, and they got to find an area with lots of towers to be able to do this, right? They add a bunch of time in. Do you think it's just the towers that are causing people to not like the end game, or are there other facets too? Or is it just the towers?
I think
It's
two
definitely not
things.
just. Yeah, no, go on. Go.
I think number one is the completion objectives are bad. Like at the moment, everything being the rare monster hunt, there's just so many times that feels awful. I think it would be a lot better if it was kill all but one, so that then it doesn't matter if you've missed one. That got improved a little bit when they added the checkpoints to maps, but it's still not perfect or anything close to it. And the second thing that I think is the case here, too much of the loot is tied to the explicit modifiers on your tablets. Too much of the loot that you get from a map. It's like, it feels like 70% of the loot that you get comes from explicit modifiers on tablets, then 10% from the implicit modifier, which might be area contains an additional breach, and then 20% from the base monsters. I might be exaggerating that a little bit, but it sort of feels that way, even if it's not quite that extreme in reality. And that's just really clunky because there's no, like, short of using Orbs of Annulment, there's no way to, and you know, those are rarer than Divines.
Yeah.
There's no way to really target the specific things you're wanting to chase other than trade. That adds a whole bunch of trade friction to any sort of optimization at end game. And then you just come to this position, is it worth doing a whole bunch of prep work to then do 12 or 13 good maps? Honestly, I think that the tower change is going to be positive in this regard, because now the towers are going to be maps themselves. They're no longer going to be, oh, I've got another, what's it called, Mesa map, a Mesa tower. I'm just going to throw a tier 1 map into it, blitz through it, and just accept that it's a tower, so it has no loot, therefore I don't care about it, I'll run the tier 1. Now you're going to put a decent map in there, and at least that's going to mean that the act of running the Mesa is going to have loot. And then, again, because it's mostly those explicit modifiers that provide the loot, I think that's going to then end up meaning that the best strategy will be to beeline to the towers, not to do the bad layouts around them. And that's going to feel quite different to what it is now.
For me, I'd throw in 2 extra points there. Firstly, one that I think doesn't get mentioned enough is that the layouts in Path of Exile 2 are mostly horrible. They are just so grinding. Like you don't kind of get the in PoE 1. It's like those bad layouts always have a place in every league, right? You always have to run every map at least once for your map completion. And then at some point, you're going to be focusing on running like the one map that you want to that's specialized for some kind of content that you're running, whatever that may be. In PoE 2, you don't really have agency over what map you're running. You kind of run maps, in sequence to get somewhere. And most of the maps, and I say most, that's not an exaggeration, most of the maps have really poor layouts. And that kind of factors into what Gog said about the completion objective of killing rares. A lot of the times you are backtracking across those horrible layouts to find the one rare all the way back near the start of the map that you missed, right? So that's one thing. And the other thing is part of that agency problem there. If you compare this to PoE 1 with player agency, each map has the things, as Elon Musk would call them, the league mechanics that are appearing on the map randomly to begin with, and then you can add things to it from towers. When in PoE 1, you have so much more agency because you have the Atlas tree that's already influencing every map you run, right? It's not randomly spawning. There are still randomly spawning league mechanics, but you have so much more weight in terms of what you want to play and what you want to run on any one map. So I think those two things. But for me, the layouts are really a big problem. That's something I really want to see them address, because I think where it comes from is that in the PoE 2 campaign, you don't really notice the bad layouts because you only run the layout once, and it's kind of done in a good way, where it's you're doing this quest objective, you're leveling up at the same time, and so it kind of feels nice. You're constantly getting more and more player power. You don't really backtrack very much in those zones, and when you actually start to run those zones many times over and over again, you start to really recognize that these layouts are bad. They just don't feel, they're not very fun to engage with. So that is one thing I'd really like to see them address.
Quick poll. Least favorite map layout in the end game. Everybody go.
Maya.
Oh yeah, Maya.
It'd be Augury, but Augury has a toucan.
Augury is unironically one of the better layouts, which is insane to say, but
exactly.
That's how bad it is. It's Augury is actually a good map. One of the things I don't know. What about you, Dreamcore?
Yeah, I'd agree. I'd agree with that.
Yeah, Maya. I think one of the biggest problems, not being able to select the map layout you want, also kind of makes running a strategy a bit frustrating. Again, comparing to Path of Exile 1, what's really nice is there are maps that complement certain strategies or certain league mechanics. So, you don't want to do expedition in Toxic Sewers, but Toxic Sewers is amazing for Blight. Or you might want to do boss rush. You do that in City Square. Whereas now it's can you really do a strategy? Yeah, you can, but you might have to, run 20 bad maps and then you get your 3 good maps. And there's just all these points of frustration and things that feel like time wasting or just the way I describe it is it almost feels petty. Playing the campaign, there's a few things that just feel so why is it like that? It's obviously not fun. It's a game. It's not fun. It's not interesting. It's just you're actually trying to just waste my time. Small things like changing out your flasks in town. Then you go through your portal. Then you realize, oh, my flask didn't fill. Have to portal back, click the well, then go back in. Things like that. Or you respawn a checkpoint and your flasks don't fill. Small things like that are just why is it like that? And I think the end game is just that exacerbated. So it's why do I have to run the tower, do the emblem, run this bad map, do this, and then I can have a little bit of fun. And then, you open your Savannah map and it's got 14 FPS. It's the one good map. So it's just I think it's tiring, and that's not what you want with endgame. You kind of want to just zone out, chill, play some maps. You don't want to have to feel fatigued when you load up PoE or oh, I'm gonna spend 3 hours today setting up so that I can have fun tomorrow.
I push back a little bit on that, the fatigue part.
Yeah?
I think on the setup, heck yeah. I mean, I have never done the whole tower running thing. I haven't, but I've read all about the strategies doing that. I'm Elkin going in PoE 2, and it's terrible, right? It's not nearly as good as it is in Path of Exile 1. You don't encounter nearly as many things, which sucks. But I don't necessarily... the turning brain off when playing, I guess that's something we could kind of debate about a little bit. Because I feel like you can already do that in Path of Exile too. The only reason you can't fully shut it off is the one portal thing, right?
Hmm.
I feel like I can, when I have my defenses in order and there's not bad mods on the map, my mind is pretty much off. I'm really only paying attention in Path of Exile 2 at this point. Early end game, during the campaign, and during boss fights in end game, like pinnacles. Do you guys not feel that on your characters? Am I just lucky, like monk privilege here?
No,
Is that what's going on? Or
kind of, but also the other thing is it's not like I don't want to have brainless gameplay where it's like
Uh-huh.
Vampire Survivors, but it's almost like you get pulled out of it constantly at these in ways that are very annoying that kind of like that cause your progress to feel stunted or slowed down, but in a way that
Yeah.
is not fun. So it's like you go to town. Now I have to put everything in my stash, right? There's like no stash tabs for this, this, and this. So I have to manually put this in that stash tab, that into that stash tab. Thank goodness we have a map. Then I need to like sell the stuff to the vendor. I need to salvage that. I need to disenchant that. I need a 3-to-1 that. I need to then like go back in my map. There's just all these points of just doof, 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 like stopping along the way. Whereas it's not so much I want to be mindless. It's more I just want a smoother experience with
totally agree. Yeah, I got you
fewer
there.
annoying things to do along the way. And that over time, if you're doing that for like 6 hours, all those little points of slowdown really add up. And you're eventually just like, man, I kind of don't really want to do this.
Yeah,
It's like
really
that.
agree with the separation there. So you've got the things where there's friction that is just time spent not playing the game that's in town. Because like in Path of Exile 1, if you pick up an item and you identify it and it's not desirable, so let's say that you pick up let's say a unique item that has a wide roll range in PoE 1 that would be good only if it rolled well, Black Sun Crest. You pick up one of them, you aren't happy with the results, you just go to the vendor, you sell it. You can trust that that one stop with the vendor, that is the same one that you sold the poorly rolled amethyst ring, it's the same vendor that you sell a bunch of other things, that it will give you the standard price for everything, except like occasionally, like early on, very early in a league, you might want to do the chaos recipe instead, maybe. Like I don't usually bother with it, but some people do. And so there's a couple of times that you have to pay attention while you're in town. But in town, it's mostly just I can go brain off there,
Yeah.
but then you jump back into a map, and at that point, it's not brain off, at least during progression periods. In Path of Exile 2, I feel like the one portal thing means that there's brain off gameplay once your character's pretty powerful in like maybe tier 10 and down, and it's brain on in 11 and up. And I think that's a really good spot for the game to be in. I wouldn't mind if they undid one portal in tiers 10 and down, but keep the genuine end game content to be the one portal system, because once you make it so that bot cheaters and characters that are just getting started can beat content, then they're the only ones that find that content engaging. So like I think that that's something that they could do with the lower tiers, but the higher tiers I like the way it is. I think there's a really big difference though between having to be paying attention when you're in a combat area and having to be paying attention when you're in town. And especially the worst thing is the well when you're in the campaign, because I don't know about you guys, but Australia had a heat wave when the game came out. It was really, really hot here, and PCs run really hot in towns in Path of Exile 2.
Oh, no.
So every time that you want to come back to town, you're like sitting on that load screen. I have a powerful PC. It's something that's fine for streaming. You're sitting on the load screen for like 7 seconds while your fan is running at full, while your PC's CPU is running at between 70 and 77 Celsius, putting out heat. It's functioning like an 850-watt heater in my room during a heat wave. And then it's like you realize afterwards, oh, I needed to do something else when I was in town. I've now got to sit through 2 more load screens while my PC is running at 75 Celsius on the CPU. This is not particularly pleasant, and that's just one of those things that seems like it's friction for friction's sake, versus things that I think are actually there so that, for instance, the reason they've got only one portal is so that once they get balance right, which they haven't yet, once they get balance right, they don't need to scale monster damage as high as they do in PoE 1.
Man,
Yeah,
let's
the
beam that
well's
straight
just
to grinding
terrible.
your games. That little monologue about the heat. Go
Yeah.
for it, Dream.
I just think that the well's just like what's the point of that? For real.
That's a great question, guys, and I'm really curious. Okay, we've been talking about all these things, all this feedback that we have for grinding your games, the frictional elements that hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of players have experienced at this point. Lots of us have talked ad nauseum about this. 0.2 Dawn of the Hunt is their first big moment to act on player feedback. So, what I want to hear from you guys, we're talking about this. Do you think Grinding Gear Games is going to shift their design philosophies in favor of the less frictional gameplay? For example, in towns, we've got a disenchanting vendor. We've got vendors that we use to sell items. We have the bench that we use to break down items with socket. All this crazy different stuff, right? Think they're gonna move on any of these things? And if so, which ones? Lolcohol, what do you think?
I think they're likely to get rid of something like the well. There's no argument for it. There's
heard it
no
here.
reason for it to be in the game. It might be some kind of like vestige of a previous version of the game where it made sense. In terms of something else I would really like is the whole disenchant or sell or salvage, or like you can do 4 things with your things. I really hope that they could condense that into a single sell window. Like you sell an item, you get a bit of gold, you get a bit of this, a bit of that, similar to PoE1. I don't know if they will shift on that. And I'm not entirely sure what their philosophy is at this point. It always felt so clear with PoE1, where they had like a very firm stance and perspective, and they were not they would like stand their ground on it. But I've been sensing a bit of hesitation or uncertainty, at least with some of the interviews where I don't know if you've noticed it, but someone will ask something and they kind of respond, yeah,
Yeah, like they don't know.
I don't know, like they don't know.
Yeah,
and you
they don't
think,
have
like,
direction.
yeah, is there a
Yeah.
core tenet or foundational principle that you can look to make these decisions where you say, does this fit in with that? And if not, get rid of it. So I'm really hoping that for 0.2.0, the direction is going to become much more obvious, especially with stuff like crafting. That's a big one for me. I don't know what the philosophy on that is. And even after the interviews with like DM and Gazi, I have no idea what their thoughts are on it. So I'm really fingers crossed, but we'll see. What about Dreamcore?
Yeah,
you think they're going to shift?
I think, well, so on things like the well and stuff, I don't see them making any changes on any of that. Any of the vendor stuff, none of it. I don't think they're going to change any of that. As for what the patch is going to deliver in terms of like game direction, that is really interesting. I think the one that there's crafting is a really big one that Lolcohol brought up there. Like it's right now, like I usually play SSF in PoE1. That's the game mode that I love. And SSF in PoE2 is absolutely terrible. It is literally the worst experience you can imagine. Like there is absolutely zero direction to get any item progression at all. Like I think Steel Mage talked about this in a really good way. He broke it down in a really good way. He said that in PoE1, right, you find a good item, or let's say you craft an item. Perhaps you find a unique item which is really rare, and then you want to build around it, right? In SSF, this is. Then you can follow steps to get all of the gear that is required to put that build together before you even roll the character. So you have all the gear ready for when you finish the campaign. You can slap it all on, and you just go from there, right? In PoE2, if you craft or find a good item for one slot, you might get lucky to find or craft a good item for another slot, and then you're like, oh, I can go for this build, but you still have zero direction to make any or finish any of the other gear. You either get it or you don't, basically. That is just it. There's no determinism there at all. So crafting is a big one. I agree. That's we need to know more about that. The one that I'm maybe even more interested in than that is how exactly is the end game going to shape up in terms of balance, right? Yes. In the campaign, the game is pretty much as they showed in the trailers, like it's a little bit faster than that, obviously, because people are now playing proper builds with like better gear. They had like really bad gear in the trailers and things like that in the demos, right?
Yep.
Soon as you get to the end game, the game's just like on steroids. But in those interviews, like the one with DM, DM and Ghazi, where they didn't really give a concrete answer as to how. All they said was that now they're in a better place in terms of recognizing like how players are interacting with the game and the balance and things like this, right? We didn't actually hear from them. I wanted to hear Mark. This is what I wanted to hear from Mark. I wanted to hear him say, "You guys are too OP.
Yes.
I'm gonna nerf you all. You're getting nerfed like 90%. You're all done next patch, right?" That's what I wanted to hear from Mark. But like, because that would have been clear direction, right? Or he could have come out and said, "We're happy with the end game. We're going to speed the rest of the game up to like get it to that place," right? Because for me, PoE 2 is going to be one of two things. It's either going to be PoE 1 but upgraded, which is kind of what it's looking like right now, right? An upgraded version of PoE 1. Eventually, we get there in 2 to 3 years' time, where the end game has been filled out and the speed is basically the same. But like, there's a bunch of extra mechanics that people can interact with. The skill system's better, animations are better, graphics, right? Or it's going to actually be a different game, and the pace is going to be slower, as we expect from all of the previous trailers. But right now, we're kind of left in the dark as to how exactly or where they see the game actually being. I mean, I don't know.
I think both those points are great, and point number 2 is one that I am also very confused about. It's not even the trailers, you guys. It's like all the press, all the interviews leading up led to this fact that, okay, we've had 10 years of bloat, 10 years of power creep. More importantly, this is a big reset button for us. Yes, we're going to try to transfer some content, but player power is going to be low. It's going to take a while to get back up to PoE 1 levels. And while we're not exactly there yet, in a lot of cases, I mean, characters are ridiculously powerful. I've been seeing builds that, obviously are geared out the wazoo, but they're one-tapping tier 4 Arbiter, tier 4 Zesht. I saw like a build, I think DS Lily showcased it, where it was one spark killed.
That was Connor, yeah.
That was Connor?
Connor,
I mean,
literally just one spark projectile killed Zesht, yeah.
And one of the craziest things is too, I mean, Gog, you like to cover like emergencies, right? If there's a, an exploit or something crazy going on. Wouldn't you think that would classify in GGG's mind as emergency? We should balance that right now. Let's not leave that in the game for 3.5 more months. Or are you more on the side of what they've decided to do and just wait until that big balance patch, or that big patch that's going to be coming out on April 4th?
Let's just say I would have been playing a lot more if they had fixed some of the glaring, egregious balance issues during January, like when it was clear. I don't think they could get the Archmage nerf that was needed into December, but it absolutely had to happen in January. And like the fact that we've had, on top of that, we had the massive duping issues with Temporalis. To be more precise, it was that you could open multiple Temporalis runs consuming only one of the Temporalis relic, and it wasn't just multiple in the sense of 2. It was like people were opening 12, 15 of them, and they were confident enough they could win 3/4 of the time. So you wound up with this thing where Temporalis was being widely duped, and it's the ultimate fast item in the game. So you had a whole bunch of things. A lot of it has been just waiting for an economy reset and waiting for a balance patch. Yeah. Honestly, Path of Exile 1's got this problem as well at the moment, where the Free Seer event has sort of reduced this a little bit, but it's kind of just solved. If you want to play melee, don't bother playing anything that's not called Lightning Strike, because Lightning Strike is just better. Like, if you've got a different melee build, you just change to Lightning Strike, and now, bang, your build is better. And there's a few other things along those lines in PoE 1, but in 2, it's that but much worse. It's like the difference between Archmage and Herald of Ice and pretty much everything else is just this massive, massive gulf. Yeah. One thing I did want to add to the previous discussion about the well and things like that is I think Grinding Games does have a philosophy at the moment, and that is that once you remove something from the game that is a source of friction, you can't really add it back. And so I think they've intentionally started at 7 out of 10 level friction, when they might think that the most fun way is to play at 4, because if it turns out the most fun way is to play at 6, then starting at 5 is a real problem. The only time I can think of that an ARPG population has been happy with the increase of new friction into a game was Diablo 3. Diablo 3's big expansion where they made it basically, they enforced infinite trade friction. You know, that's what it's called. When you going into it, forcing SSF or something akin to SSF is adding infinite trade friction. And that was done because the presence of negligible trade friction in that game had forced them to make everything they wanted to be prestigious incredibly rare. So rare that you couldn't find it. And you'd find the same in Path of Exile 1, you'd find the same now. If you think of a league that doesn't have any loot disgorging ridiculousness like the Rogue Exiles in Frisia at the moment. So if you take Settlers Original, a unique item that is either tier 1 or 2 rarity like Unnatural Instinct that is widely desired, it tends to be a massive drop if it drops for you. You know, it's like 10 divines or so early on. Might be up, might be a little bit higher, might be a little bit lower. But if you had no friction on it, if everyone that picked it up was able to instantly sell it on an auction house type system, then that item, there'd be so many of them currently sit in stashes awaiting sale that they're removed from the economy. If you don't have them removed from the economy, then suddenly they start turning over much quicker, and as a result, there's just more of them. So if you want it to be at the same level of prestige it is now, then you need to make it rarer. And Diablo 3 had done that. They'd balanced the entire game around the presence of an auction house, and that meant they had to make things, if they wanted it to feel like an Unnatural Instinct in Path of Exile 1, then they had to make it perhaps 3 or 4 times rarer than a UI in PoE 1. So that was their way of doing it, and the player base rejoiced when they removed that ability to trade them and made it so that you could realistically find it yourself. That's the only case I can think of where adding friction after the fact was well received by ARPG players.
GOG then, I mean, the big question is, I mean, it's what Dreamcore just posed. 4 months, millions of players seeing these builds, these crazy powerful builds popping off all over YouTube, playing them yourself, right? You know, with the Herald of Ice, Herald of Thunder, blowing up screens in one swing of a quarterstaff. If they nerf that into oblivion, you know, like I think I would like, it sounds like Dream, you'd also like that. You wanted Mark to be like 90% nerf, right? A lot of people kind of want that slower pace. Do you think that's even feasible, or will that introduce way too much friction into the game if you're not blowing up packs with a click or two in endgame anymore? Like a lot of us thought, you know, wasn't initially going to be the case.
So here's my question on that. Here's a follow-up question, really. And that is, what if they split the difference and make it so that Herald of Ice keeps its damage projection, but the damage is lowered to the point that it's only really viable in tier 1 to 5 maps? What do you think is going to be the impact then? This was something that Path of Exile 1 had to deal with back in the era. I kind of feel like this is like 2.2 era in Path of Exile 1, where clear speed got really fast in low tier maps, but higher tier maps, there was enough pressure against you from progressing fast because players were just so much weaker back then. That what this meant was that often you'd feel like the correct way to progress was to spend more time than was fun in low tier maps. And this is the really difficult thing grinding new games. They've got to figure out a solution to this. They've got to find a way that they can make it so that progressing up the tiers feels worthwhile, but also that it's that there's something that makes it. Yeah, I don't really envy trying to work that out.
No, it's very difficult, right? Because if you know the game, like if you naturally gravitate towards something like Herald of Ice, or like if you're playing a quarterstaff in the current balance with charged staff and everything, you're blowing up everything right when you hit endgame. And it feels so weird when you then contrast that with a Titan who's using a mace, right? And Dreamcore, you know all about that, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, for in the case of Herald of Ice, like I don't really see them changing it numerically. I think it has to be a mechanical change on Herald of Ice. Like I think the mechanics of the skill are just they're just problematic, because if you do what GOG said there and you like lower the damage, that basically just penalizes people who have got bad weapons, and then anyone who's got like a really good weapon is still going to be popping off like in the in late maps because they just got the best weapon that's because it's based on attack damage and
Mm-hmm.
I mean I don't know. Yes, you could make the skill have a higher reservation and things that there's lots of options like that, but I mean it's the same with Archmage. It's like when you look at the numbers on Archmage, like how is that even a thing? Anyone could have looked at those numbers within 10 minutes. Any PoE player, like who hasn't even played PoE 2 before, could look at those numbers and be like, that is ridiculous. I'm using that.
Did we check which character
Yeah.
class Mark is playing? Like, is he playing an Archmage? Maybe.
Yeah,
I think he
it's the
said he
same
got
thing
to
with-
what tier 15 maps and like what is that 30 maps or something? Ah, it must be Archmage, right?
Yeah, probably. And same with like Energy Shield. It was just so.
Yeah, the numbers
They-
just
they're-
out of control. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like there's no percent life. There's like 2% life things on the tree, and then just like multiple 40%, 60%, 50% ES, and you think like this is so obviously just obvious.
I mean, I can see the plan they were going for with Energy Shield. The plan that they were going for is that you can go for Energy Shield, you can invest into Energy Shield. It's like this extra life pool, and recovering Energy Shield is horrible, right? That's what they were going for. Because if you look at
Yeah.
it, like so much of the recovery that PoE 1 has for Energy Shield doesn't exist, right? There's no Energy Shield leech, and getting like recharge baseline is horrible. And then you need to like invest a lot to get it. But the thing is, then they just have the reservation
Grim
skill. I forget the name of
Feast.
it now.
Grim
Grim
Feast.
Feast. There you
Yeah.
go. Which is just that solves
2x
everything,
ES.
right?
Yeah,
Like
completely.
you just walk through. You're just literally walking through the map. Like you don't even have to do anything special. You just get it anyway. So you get all of the extra energy shield. So you already have a massive pool of energy shield. Then you get all the extra, and you've already solved recovery as well because of Grim Feast. You're just walking over all the corpses. So that's like they basically shot themselves in the foot with that reservation skill because the design they went for was that yeah, you can have this giant life pool, but as soon as you start taking damage, it is really hard to recover that because you have to invest a lot into recharge. That's what they were going for. You have to invest a lot into recharge. You have to buy yourself time. It's if you actually look at it from design perspective. I don't know if any of you guys have played a Dissolution of the Flesh build in PoE 1,
Yes.
but that's basically like as soon as you equip that item and you start playing a build with that item, the game is different.
It is.
It's just different. Like you have to play around that item. That's what they were going for, I think, with Energy Shield. It's so rough to look at those numbers and be like, okay, look at it. 12.5% recharge per second, and it only starts after 4 seconds of taking no damage. Like that's what they were going for. You look at
That
all
makes
of the
sense.
Energy Shield recovery mechanics, all of them are bad. Zealot's Oath is changed. It's based on the amount of life recovery you get from life regen rather than the actual like percentage. It doesn't convert percentage to percentage. It converts like, if I have 1,000 life and I have 10% regen, it's 100. That 100 will go across. It won't be 10% of your energy shield, right? So they put all these things in place to make it so that recovery was going to be rough for energy shield, and then they just put Grim Feast in the game. So they basically, they shot themselves in the foot there. If they remove Grim Feast from the game, you might find that the actual balance of energy shield, even though it's a little bit, I would still argue it's overtuned. But even if you pull back like 10 or 20% of the amount of energy shield on the tree, without Grim Feast, recovery becomes a big problem. People have to really start thinking about it.
Yeah. Yep.
Can I add one more thing as well, Lo, that I think is a real problem here? And that is that if you're playing an energy shield character, you have the agency to choose between damage and tankiness on the tree. If you're playing a life-based character, you do not have this agency. Granted, there's a couple of recovery mechanics you can spec into, like Recoup, but you don't have the ability to just say, all right, I'm going to spec into enlarging my life pool somehow. And that's one of those things that I think they need to say, all right, both of them either need to have the agency or both of them need to not have the agency. And that's just essential. Otherwise, the one that has the agency is just going to be better because you can just swap it.
Yeah,
Like you
yeah, that's
just
a
go, "Oh, I'm
great
doing
point.
this particular boss. All right, well, I'm just going to unspec 5 points and spec in 5 points, either to go more glass cannon or to go more tanky.
Yeah,
Do you
that's a
think
great point.
they-
And obviously, there's also go on, Lolcohol.
I was just gonna ask, do you think they should put percent life back on the tree? Because that was like a big thing. Oh, we're removing it so that you have more flexibility. Did any of you ever feel bad specking life on the tree in PoE1? Is it something you want back, or how do they balance this?
Great
I
question.
definitely never
It feels
felt
like
bad.
if the numbers are low on percent life, and if they're alongside other things, like if you take think of the cruel preparation node in PoE1, which for anyone that doesn't play PoE1, it's 5% tri-res and 10% life. It's near the witch start in PoE1. What if you were to instead have that be 7% tri-res and 3% life? Then it becomes something that's doing something else for you, but it has a bit of a life rider on it.
Hmm.
Or another thought, what if all notables had 1% maximum life on them? Not written out, but that was just part of life-based
That's fair.
characters.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
I feel like there has
Okay,
to
so
be
the-
some other way to scale defenses, though, because
I
it's-
don't think the thing that they were trying to get rid of with the whole like not putting life on the tree, I believe, was because they thought that it was like a mandatory thing that
Right.
you had to do. Like,
Yeah.
Captain Lance brought this up in his video, in his feedback video for PoE2, and he was right. Like, it's not a mandatory thing. There are plenty of builds that are full glass cannon. They just go all in damage. They're doing billions of damage, right?
Yep.
That's actually a thing. Like you just kill everything before it even makes it to you, basically. Like that's a choice that's being made right there. It's a choice when you click those life nodes. Like, I don't think there was ever an issue there.
Yeah.
And in PoE2, they've kind of created the same issue for those topside builds, right?
Yep.
On the bottom side there, on like a mace warrior, you don't have that thing because you can't have that thing, right? There's no life that I can click on. I can't click on life, so I don't have the option. But up there at the top of the tree, I have energy shield, and I actually have to click on it. But that feels good to click on it.
It does.
Because it's like,
yeah.
I'm clicking on it because now I can actually play now I actually have
Yeah.
some hit pool, right, to tank some hits that come in. But again, like, you could just choose to not invest into energy shield if you wanted to on that top tree and just go full glass cannon. That's another choice you're making. So I don't think there was ever a problem there with having life on the tree and it being mandatory. That just didn't ever exist. That's something they've made up.
Yeah, and it feels really good to spec into defenses or feeling like I have enough damage, I can actually invest in more tankiness. Or I'm gonna just have less damage but be more tanky. It is a decision, and it's a good decision where it's I want either this good thing or this good thing, or I can have a blend of both. It's not just it's very if you play like mercenary or something on the bottom side of the tree, it feels very there's just like it's sparse, man. It
Yeah,
feels
that's
so
not.
like the choices are so obvious, and you can't really spec into defenses. I mean, you could try spec into armor, but you know the state of armor.
Oh God.
We know.
We'll just
but,
link the
but
crypt
it-
videos. We'll just link the crypt videos. It's okay.
Yeah,
I was
but-
actually just talking to a friend the other day about how the current state of defenses in Path of Exile 2 feels like what defenses felt like in PoE 1 before that big. You guys remember the big defense rework in 3.16, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
The league after Expedition, Scourger. And like, but it's worse. So it's like that, but worse. Because in PoE 1, at that time, if you guys remember, back before 3.16, you had block and you had dodge, and that was about it. Armor was pretty bad. Evasion was like it was worse than what it is now. It was slightly better than armor, but there wasn't really. It was like chance-based defenses, and like playing. I mean, I like to play hardcore. Playing hardcore was just like, well, I guess I'll just die, right? Like you know, it's that meme. I guess I'll just die.
Yeah.
But in PoE 2 right now, that's kind of how it feels, but it's worse than that because for those builds that aren't on the top side of the tree and can't click those energy shield nodes, they have even less options than that. Like, block is very consuming in terms of investment. You need to spend a lot of points to get a lot of good block, and then it's just block, right? When you don't block, you just die again.
Right.
Same thing.
Dreamcore, do you want to lay out your theory about, what may have happened circa 3.16 with Path of Exile 1 and Path of Exile 2? Do you remember the theory I'm talking about? Where they, started learning lessons and rolling out changes in PoE 1, and then PoE 2, maybe they didn't change the code over, right?
Oh, what do you mean? Because characters got too strong defensively?
Well, like in PoE 2, we were still using the pre 3.16 armor formula, right? And in PoE 2,
Right.
there's all this stuff that is like missing. That's just baseline in PoE 1 now.
Yeah. Well, okay. So the theory is that Jonathan is just like Yeah, he hasn't played PoE 1 for like
They're
5
out of
years.
PoE 1, right? Like the PoE 2 dev team.
Back at, so for those who haven't seen that interview, back at ExileCon 2023, Cred did an interview with Jonathan, and in that interview, he discussed Flask changes that had happened 2 years prior to that interview. The Flask changes were affixes that were added to the Flasks to, the different like affixes, like remove corrupted blood, become immune to corrupted blood for like X amount of time, right? Jonathan didn't know that any of those things were in PoE 1. He said that those things were a PoE 2 thing that PoE 1 had stolen and taken into the game, right? So that's a change that had happened 2 years. So we're talking 2021 is when that change happened.
Right.
So Jonathan has not played PoE 1, has not been in sync with PoE 1 for many, many years at this point, many years. So a lot of and this is actually, for me, this is really concerning because this is the lead dev on PoE 2, and PoE 1 has struggled over so many hurdles and like found things to be problematic and then solved them in a good way, right? So they're basically doing all of the things again, right? They're making the same mistakes and then they're having to solve them again, whereas they've already made these mistakes before. They've already solved them. So these things are like, I don't know.
Yeah. I've had that feeling with a few things where it's, you just say, why is it like this? It worked in PoE 1. I know some people hate, don't talk about PoE 1. I mean, it's a very obvious comparison to make, to compare PoE 1 and PoE 2. I mean, they share the same name. But things that feel good in PoE 1, it sometimes feels like they're being removed for the sake of being removed, or like you said, maybe the solutions aren't, they're not, certain people aren't aware of them. Defenses in PoE 1 right now feel so good, man.
They're incredible.
I love it. It's fascinating to build your character in these interesting ways and like build these different defensive layers, and you've got all these options, and then it's just been like stripped, and you ask why, and it's hard to have a constructive conversation about this, because on the one hand you have people saying like, oh, stop comparing it to PoE 1, this is PoE 2. And then you have people on the other side who are like, oh, PoE 2 bad. And it's like, I really want to know why they have made certain decisions. Again, when I go back to crafting, one of the biggest things is like, why have they stripped crafting? It's such a brilliant system in Path of Exile 1. Why have they stripped it? And they didn't have an answer, which was, like you said, it was quite concerning. If they said, why did you remove scours and all forms of reforge? And they could say, we did it because we want to do this and this, and we feel like it undermines potential future systems for the game. Just be patient. Like, we think it's going to be cool, but we do have ideas. If that was the answer, I'd say, okay, cool. But when people ask these questions,
they have said that the reason is that
they did.
Scours basically delete the relevance of loot on the ground.
That's
the reason that in Path of Exile 1, everyone turns off rare items on their filter by day 3, whereas in Path of Exile 2, tier 4 or tier 5 rare item remains loot all the way through to deep endgame.
Does it though? Because
but the only difference there is you're trading off clicking a scouring orb for picking up an item, right? The two things are interchangeable. Like you're just filling up your stash tabs, like 10 stash tabs with items to throw in that 3-to-1 thing.
Well, there you go, Dreamcore. More stash tabs.
Feel like...
there we go. Yeah, conspiracy unlocked.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But I feel like if there's this obsession with ground loot and the sanctity of ground loot, and you have to find your item on the ground for it to matter, Path of Exile 1 and Path of Exile 2 has the same progression. You find your item on the ground in the campaign, early maps, you're finding your upgrades like that. The thing that undercuts ground loot more than anything else is trade, right? And I love trade. Don't get me wrong. I do not want trade removed from the game, but it feels like you're taking scours out of the game when, if you have this weird thing of like, oh, ground loot doesn't matter in Path of Exile 1, which it does. It does, by the way. It's just that there's 20,000 things and you pick up like 5 of them and hide the rest. But ground loot does matter. If they really want to kill let's not say big words. If they want to undermine the foundation of crafting to protect ground loot, I would say if that is their goal, rather remove the trade site. And I don't think that there is a problem, which is why it's confusing that they have changed this system so dramatically. It's almost like there's a perceived problem that I don't think exists, and so there is like a really brash solution that I think makes the game worse. And I would like to
I would
understand.
go so far against that I would
Yeah.
say that the one thing I would like to see ported back to Path of Exile 1 from 2 relating to crafting is the removal of scours and alterations. Scours and
From
alterations
PoE1,
are the reason that in PoE 1 so many mods have to be so rare. Have you ever sat and alteration spammed for +1 all skills on an amulet?
yes.
And it's like 1 in 2,000 to hit it, and you probably have to do this 5 times if you're doing a
Let me-
recombinator craft. This is because they decided to make
Yeah.
it so easy to. This is because they've made alterations a thing. That means that they have to make anything that's prestigious rare. Otherwise, it's just a good
Which
mod
is-
that's common, kind of like max
Yeah.
tier life on boots. Max
But-
tier life on boots is 1,000 rarity. It is 1,000 waiting. Have a look at how much more common the premium mods are in Path of Exile 2. All because they nuke scouring mobs. And
Well, yeah, but
alterations.
they're common.
But they're so harder to get.
Well,
'cause
no,
you
but
can't
the thing
craft.
is that they're more common, but then they're not very useful because they drop on an item with trash loot, like trash other mods.
Exactly. How do you
So
get
like,
them?
even if you find the mod, you can't even use it.
Yeah, there's ways
And-
to craft things.
I
I
mean,
think what's missing is low-end crafting at the moment.
Please.
What's missing is things that you can that don't involve using a 5 divine orb omen in order to in order to try and upgrade an item. That's what's missing currently. But I think that
Omens just don't exist. Okay, let's
Yeah,
let's,
they
let,
don't.
let's not
Yeah.
let's not lie around it. Okay, omens non-existent.
I want
I
to
mean, they're
propose.
available to trade.
Yeah. Okay. So, like on the topic of alteration spam, which I agree is bad, but again, I'm saying, do we need to? Are there not better solutions to improve a system without undermining the foundations of it? So, for example, people always use this example where they say alteration spam, right? It's the mod is rare, therefore you have to alteration spam. Alteration spam is horrible, right? So, solution: remove alterations from the game, remove scours. My idea instead, similarly to 6 linking items on the crafting bench, you can spam with your fusings and hope, or you can spend 1,500 orbs of fusing. How about instead we have a crafting bench which says you put your item on it, you say, I want +1 level of all skill gems, it costs you 2,000 alterations. You click that button, and it's a higher cost than the average odds of rolling it. But this is what I'm talking about, is like there's these things that
You just
people
bypass that with
might,
trade.
but
You'd
I
let
mean,
someone
that's
on
what,
TFT do all of the alteration spamming for you, and you'd pay them a premium that's less. The same way that right now, if you
but
want
that's
a
what
6
people
link
do
product
now.
armor,
But
you
that but
trade for it.
that's if trade like that.
But that is, I'm saying that's what people do now. But instead, you have a crafting bench where you can deterministically skip over the horrible friction of clicking a button 3,000 times to just pay it to get that one modifier, at least a very low tier, a very low weight item modifier. Why is that not a better solution than?
Or you can just not have ultra low weight modifiers. Like Path of Exile 2 doesn't seem to have anything that's more than 6 times rarer than the most common mods.
But that's because
Whereas,
there's no agency.
except
well,
on fizz
not-
weapons.
Yeah, there's like very, very little agency. Whereas, is that a problem though? What's wrong with a very low weight mod, if I may ask that?
Well, you're saying, like, it basically means that it's going to be an ordeal to get it,
Mhm.
or you can simply make it more common and have it so that you can actually expect to occasionally loot it, and then you can have this exciting moment of going, oh, there's a tier 4 rare item that's dropped from this boss. I can pick this up, and maybe it's not going to be an upgrade, but at least there's a meaningful chance that it is.
Is that the case though? Because what I find, at least from my experience, was that once again you circumvent that process by using the trade site, right? Especially in Path of Exile 2, where it's very hard to have agency over the items that your character is using. You're not going to run around killing monsters hoping that you get that item. If you're playing Trade League, you're going to go on the trade side and say, I want that, and that, and then buy it. And then that's it.
But then
I-
you're also going to pick up, you're going to ID something, and it's like, it's perfect for someone else, but not for you. And that means it's good loot. It's like, okay, you pick up boots that are 30% movement speed, they're fire resist, they're cold resist, they're life. But they don't fit your build for some reason. Maybe they're a dexterity base and
Yeah.
your character has no dex. Well, that's not good for you, but you can then just list it for sale, and
Yeah.
it's good for someone else.
That's true. But we have that in PoE1 as well.
But
And
the way I
with
see that
crafting.
is that one system is
Really?
good for trade and SSF, and the other one's only good for trade.
I
Which
mean,
I
when they
think
introduced
overall is
SSF,
bad.
they did promise to not rebalance the game around it.
I
at
know
all.
that, but they've already, so the changes they've been making in the last like 2 years to PoE1 have been changes designed for trade that have also been very good for SSF. SSF is in such an incredible place in PoE1 right now. It's amazing. You have
I mean,
good.
Faustus isn't.
I don't care about Faustus. I'm an SSF player. I don't care about it. But
But
I'm
it was
saying
the biggest change in trade.
it's the biggest trade for you guys, yeah. But I'm not using trade, right? So what I'm saying is like I have amazing agency over what I want to craft. Like I can just, if I want to chase down a particular craft, like I need this, and this, I can do that. I can use the Atlas tree to farm specific league mechanics, whatever, and I can actually craft an item from the beginning, from the ground up. In PoE2 that doesn't exist. Like I said, you either find it or you don't. So that's just, and the thing that you're referring to there is that yes, it makes sense for trade. It does make sense. Like it absolutely does make sense because, like you said, you'll drop a good item. Like it might be good for you, and actually, the feeling that you have when you drop a good item on the ground is a good one. But like Lolcohol said, we already have that in PoE1. Like you can drop a good item on the ground, especially in early league. Ground loot is still a thing. Like you on league start, you're finding your items off the ground. Like that's that's still a
By
thing.
the time you do your first tier 17, even if you do the first, even if you do a tier 17 as soon as you're capable of it in Path of Exile 1, as soon as you think you're 50-50 to be able to beat it before 6 portals, by that point you are not picking up items off the ground unless they're a crafting reagent.
But that's
Crafting
fine.
reagent can include like an overquality necrotic armor, or even just an I-86 necrotic armor. That's a crafting reagent at that point. It's not an item.
But
So do you
remember
guys...
that the reason why we're not picking up items off the ground is because of the other systems that exist in PoE1. Like,
It's because crafting deletes them. It turns them from loot into non-loot.
no, it's because the crafting system exists. Is why
Because
we don't.
if
In
you can
PoE2,
make
there isn't
something
any.
better-
There's no crafting. There's zero
you can
crafting.
trivially make something better than an item has any chance of being, then that item is not loot.
But it's not trivial for a start. There's plenty of systems. They all interweave with each other. If you need to farm those things yourself, then it takes a long time.
I think one of the other things Path of Exile 1 has at the moment is a monstrous gulf between players like us that actually understand all these systems and someone that's coming along without that sort of many years of back knowledge of the game. And this is exacerbated by the crafting system and also by some of the stuff people were talking about before about defenses, where Path of Exile 1, if you go into it, you're talking about how, yeah, defenses for a veteran player that knows what they're doing are really good at the moment. If you are a rookie player and you're just doing what feels right at the time, you're going to end up with a wet noodle at endgame. And that's partly because so many of these things can come together. Now, okay, you might pick right. You might go, say, Gladiator max block. That's something that's easy to do with Versatile Combatant. That's something that's easy to make in PoE1. But if you pick wrong and you go most other ascendancies, you don't have any obvious options for fixing your defenses. You kind of have to go to a well-established build maker. In Path of Exile 2, that gulf isn't quite so big, and I think the same is the case with crafting. In Path of Exile 1, if your goal is to get a high evasion energy shield necrotic armor, then someone that's a rookie might be like, oh, this sounds like a job for dense fossils by themselves, nothing else. And they'll get something that's like, and they might get 2400 evasion, 500 ES off that. But someone that knows exactly what they're doing is like, dense fossils. Oh yeah, that's what it used to be. Recombinator, and they're going to go and make things efficiently, and you're going to have a wider gulf between sections of the player base as a result. Now, in Path of Exile 2 at the moment, there is simply less power that is gated behind knowledge. I think that's the case across the game as a whole at the moment, and there is still some, like, just knowing that Archmage Grimfeast and Herald of Ice are overpowered is one of the most important pieces of knowledge you can have in PoE 2 currently. But I think that the idea at the moment that itemization, that the rookie player killing their 12th tier 7 boss of a map, they actually have a realistic chance of picking up a set of boots from that boss, which is a rare item that other players want. They probably won't, but they've got a realistic chance. And that's something that I think is worth trying to hold on to if they can do it. I also, at the same time, though, think that we want some directed ways to go, okay, right now I'm having troubles with fire resistance of my character. I need a directed way to address that.
You said it at the start. Low barrier for entry crafting, just like something that's not omens, that no one really is going to have access to unless they're uber rich and they're farming out the wazoo. But not something as simple as like runes, where I don't think those work to you guys. I maybe I have a hot take on runes, but I don't think they accomplish the goal of fixing.
So, like, just going back to what Lolcohol was talking about before this whole like discussion came up with the crafting. Like, I think something you touched on briefly there was the kind of change for change sake, right? That's kind of a lot of the things in PoE 2 do feel like that, like change for change sake, and runes are a great example of that. Like, I think the crafting bench in its simplest form, like, not forget all of the meta mod stuff, forget all of that. Just the simplest form of being able to add like a little bit of life or bit of resistances or bit of attributes to an item is just a better thing than runes.
Jeez.
Like, I don't know, it just is.
I don't care if it takes up an affix.
Explain it.
I don't care. Like, it's fine with me.
Too.
Do you guys agree with that? I know Lolcohol, our first pod, like, we were like, bench, bring it back. Like,
yep.
You guys still on board with that, everybody? Pretty much.
Back.
Like, I like the sockets on items, by the way. They can stay. Like, I like soul cores. I think they should be rarer. I think they should be like really rare and really, really cool. You should feel great about like, I found a soul core, like, and I have this item that has a socket, like, and now I'm getting this extra mod. Like, that's just. But runes are just. Why not just have the crafting bench? Again, that's another example of a system that was already solved. They already had the problem. They solved it. Now they have the problem again and trying to solve it in a different way that's just inferior to the way they already used to solve the problem.
And I think adding the crafting bench back would also help keep that magic, that GOG you were talking about, of people picking up items and being like, oh my gosh, this is awesome upgrade. This is very cool, because it can even be just, 3 mod, 4 mod, 5 mod. Good mods, and then you can add that mystical 6th or 5th, whatever on there, and it will be, wow, that's my GG item. That's awesome. Those players who aren't engaging with all these crafting systems or the market, they'll feel really good that they were able to finish it out or just add that extra bit of power on there.
Yeah,
I feel like that's such an easy layer to add.
Immediate problem. Because like I think that's the key thing that the Path of Exile 1 crafting bench does. It's like, oh, okay, my fire resistance is too low. Okay, I'm going to fix that by visiting the crafting bench. Whereas you can sort of almost do that a little bit with runes, but the numbers are just too low. And it's, I don't think it's quite there.
Especially in the campaign. I'm feeling this a lot with the race praxis. Is that there are many, especially with I'm been practicing monk, there's many things you need on the class to have it feel like it's functioning well. And currently I've asked a lot of better runners this question, which is if the loot that you need doesn't drop, if the vendor doesn't sell what you need, if your currency doesn't hit what you need, and if you don't get lucky on gambling, what do you do? What do you do? Because it feels like you're just at the mercy of RNG. There are things you can do to improve, like save your currency for the right base, or, check your vendors more regularly. There are things you can do to optimize that. but it gets to a point where sometimes you just get unlucky. And this is maybe a bit of a bold prediction. So we got the race on tomorrow. I suspect the leaderboard is going to look very different depending on people's RNG. So,
Yeah.
and perhaps this will be more evident over time if they do more races and the game doesn't change. But I expect as more people get experience with racing, whenever there is a race, the leaderboard is just going to shuffle. Like it's going to be different names at the top. You might have, let's say, a similar top 50, but it's going to change quite dramatically. I might be way off on this. The thing with PoE1 is you've got, and it's perhaps too early in PoE2 to be saying this, but in PoE1, there's enough tools at players' disposal that you can be the best racer and always win, or almost always win. But I'm not sure. The fact that no one could answer that question of what do you do when you don't get the thing you need makes me wonder that tomorrow's race we could have like a completely new name as the top witch or something. You're like, who the hell's this guy? Oh,
Yeah.
it's just the dude who dropped the insane wand in Act 2 and then like blasted the rest of the game. Whereas the other dude who's been practicing the whole time just like got screwed on RNG. I don't know. We'll see. I'm hoping that's not going to be the case. I'm hoping that these people be able to still perform well when the RNG doesn't hit. But when, let's say, for example, on the monk, you need your fire damage, your lightning damage, and your cold damage. If you're missing one of those elements, your damage is just so much worse. In PoE1, what you do is just go to the crafting bench, put on that lightning, and then you're sorted. What happens
I think
when
there's
Sarge doesn't get his lightning damage or something like that? Does he just fall down to like 20th or something?
I do think there is something in PoE1 that's comparable, but the thing is that the race formats that are popular have been the ones where RNG plays a smaller role. So in Path of Exile 1, if you consider like if you were to have a race to level 97, this is not a popular format, but if you were to have a race to level 97, then there'd be certain things that would give you just a monstrous advantage if you had certain items drop. Like, okay, Mageblood would be the extreme outlier or headhunter, but even short of that, those are pretty unlikely. If you get something like an Unnatural Instinct drop, it's going to be a pretty substantial boost, and there's other things that would be even better than that. So that format is not very popular as a result. Whereas if you're going to 2 Void Stones or 4 Void Stones, it's much less significant, the RNG, the boost that you get from getting supremely good RNG. So if you take, say, again, take the 4 Void Stone example in Path of Exile 1, which probably compares to like if you were to have a race to Zesh plus 2 in Path of Exile 2 for anyone that doesn't play the original game. If you have someone that's like top tier racer like Jung Rowan, he would usually be in the top 15 or top 20 on that and it'd be competitive for first. But if he hit something absolutely crazy for his build, like if he was playing an Ignite build and he hit Cloak of Flame, then he's going to end up as first as a result of that luck, unless someone else outspikes him on it. So there is this sense of luck. And honestly, I like to think of it in terms of the humble D20.
Humble D20.
Any of you that are TTRPG nerds like myself, you could imagine like Jung Ron's stats in the race might be 17 plus 1d20, whereas I might be 6 plus 1d20. Someone that's brand new to the game might be -1 plus 1d20. And you'll see that Jung Ron's almost always going to eclipse me. But then there's a whole bunch of people that might be 14, and there's a couple of people like Ben that might be 19 instead. And so they're going to have an advantage, but RNG is still going to decide. The difference is the format determines what sort of die you're rolling, whether it be a D20, whether it be a D12, whether it be a D4. And that is going to be the thing that in Path of Exile 2 is going to take us a while to figure that out. That said, I think one of the worst issues with RNG is boots in Path of Exile 2 at the moment, that it just feels so bad in the campaign if you're behind on move speed. If you just ID everything that drops and that's a rare, and you just can't get 20% movement speed before doing Jamanra, or 25% before doing Geonor in Act 4. All these things just make things feel so bad because suddenly you're both defensively weaker and you're moving slower. And Path of Exile 1 solves that through the crafting bench.
Yeah.
Because, yep, I can't get the 30% movement speed boots to drop, but at least these boots that I got in my third tier 3 map that are pretty good otherwise, at least I got 23% movement speed from the crafting bench.
Totally agree. Are you guys fans of boots having implicit movement speed modifiers? Or you guys like having the GG always need movement speed on boots? It's just 1 of 6 almost every time.
I mean, at that point, just remove the mod from the game and increase the base movement speed.
Yeah, that is
so?
literally is that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is?
I don't really
agree with
like.
that.
I don't really like the idea of implicit movement.
Do you
speed
like
on
having
boots.
it be one of the affixes on the gear that you just, it's like, the affix you always need to get no matter what. It's kind of like your defense on the tree that you're going to grab for your
Well,
particular
it's
build,
kind
right?
of. I think I prefer it being an affix, but
Yeah.
as Gog was saying there, it's like it's amplified. The problem is amplified in PoE 2 because you
PoE
can't
2.
really solve it when it doesn't go
Right.
your way. So I like it being an affix, and I think it works in PoE 1, but it doesn't work as well in PoE 2 because you can't really solve the problem of having bad luck. And one of the other things there, I think I seem to remember watching. I think it was Sarge. It might have been Sarge. I was watching his practice a couple of weeks back, and he was just resetting the moment he didn't find an item with increased rarity early on. Instant reset. Because the difference between having like 10-15% rarity early on is just absolutely insane. Like the amount of rare items you're dropping, which then it's like a compounding factor, right? Because you get these rare items that make you a little bit more powerful, which means you can go a little bit faster. You get those other items faster because you have rarity, and it's just kind of accelerates your progress so much faster. I mean, obviously, rarity is a problem. No one's gonna. I really hope they're gonna do something about that. But
Remove it
that's
entirely. It's just a failed experiment.
We'll
Of thing.
see.
I mean, look,
Expect a junior
I
developer to come
think
into a meeting and say, "Hey, I've got this really cool idea," and then every experienced developer says, "That's an interesting one. Here's the reasons it's going to be a terrible game experience, and this is why it's gone."
yeah, I mean, rarity affecting currency is just beyond me how they managed to get to that. That was a terrible decision. A terrible
Both in
decision.
Kalandra and in PoE 2.
Yeah, which again, going back to what you were saying, Dream is like they've had this problem, they've solved it, and then they reintroduced it. Like, huh?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, in PoE 1 right now, like rarity is one of those things where you never really feel bad for not having it, right? It's not like if you have a little bit of it on an item, you don't really notice it, and it's just like. But then you can invest into it, and obviously you can do some magic find strat still, and that's actually still somewhat of a thing. Obviously, when quantity was around, that was different. That's a whole other ball game. Like we're not getting into that.
We already got a lot worse with Faustus as well, because the first 30% rarity feels like it's a 25 to 27% more multiplier to the amount of gold you get, and that means that gold costs for both Faustus and for the town setup are balanced around the fact that you've got some rarity, because power gamers have it, and you want to throttle them a little bit. If they didn't have rarity in Path of Exile 1, then some of the town upgrades that cost 100,000 would be 70,000 instead. Some of the Faustus exchanges, like it wouldn't be requesting a Horn Scarab of Nemesis from your counterparty in the trade wouldn't be 125 gold, it'd be 80 or it'd be 100.
Yeah.
Now, rarity is one of those things that they were also asked about in that infamous DM Gazzy interview that happened in January.
Yeah.
And they also were just like, it's good. It's good. We don't see a problem with it. Do you think that's them
that
just...
interview, man? I actually can't. Like, there was so many parts of that interview which just, I was just like, my mind was like melting. Like,
I had some thoughts about that interview.
The thing about the bleeding, right? You know, the bleeding and energy shield, and then they're looking at each other like confused. These guys are the lead devs. They're like, no, bleeding was designed to be an anti-caster mechanic. Like, anti-caster would mean that it's actually designed to be worse against energy shield, since energy shield is supposed to be a caster defense, quote unquote, right?
Yep.
And then, like, it's literally they said it was a bug, and there it is in the tooltip in the game. This is how it was designed. There's no getting around it. It was designed this exact way, where it doesn't get inflicted if you don't deal damage to life, and it only deals damage to life. So therefore, a character with energy shield is pseudo immune to bleeding, basically. It was designed like that. It's written in the tooltip. So at some point, somewhere, I don't know whether it's the case that they don't remember. It could be. It could be the case that they don't remember. I think what's more likely has happened here is that they designed it with this whole like thematic aspect of you need to hit a monster, or a monster has to hit a character and deal damage to life, and then it only deals life damage, right? As if it was bleeding them. That's the thematic approach they're going for, right?
Yeah.
It's bleeding, therefore it deals damage to life. You need to actually cut through someone's armor and actually hit their life pool to inflict that bleeding in the first place. And then someone has, right before launch, someone's like, "Oh guys, like CI exists. Like that we got a problem. Like CI, people click CI, they're going to insta die to any bleed that's applied to them. They just instantly fall over. Like, we have to solve this now. Like, this is an emergency problem." And some dev who's, like, realized this has just been brushed off, like, just fix it. Right? And they've just fixed it. They've just fixed it by making it so that it can't be applied unless it deals damage to life. That was, like, the thing. So now it's just, you basically buffed CI builds. You buffed monsters that have energy shield. Like, you guys have all seen the clip, right? Where Quinn is just unable to inflict bleeding on the boss at the end of the Tribe of the Seconders because it just has Giga Energy Shield.
Oh.
Like, come on, man. That one part, obviously there was loads of those sort of things that happened in that interview, but that one thing was just like, man, that's just mind-boggling. Like, these guys are talking about a mechanic as if they designed it to be that way, and it's literally, and they're saying it's a bug, but it's not a bug. It's right there.
I think that was too soon.
What it did at some point.
Go for it, Gog. Sorry, go for it.
I was going to say, I bet that it changed what it did at some point, and that they've played with various test versions more so than they've played with the real game. I think that's something that's really confusing. Like, the number of times that I will be confident that a particular interaction works a certain way in Path of Exile 1, only to find out that actually that's the way that it worked back in 3.13 to 3.21, then it got changed.
Yeah.
And I remember getting caught out with that a while ago with the there's again Calandra and item rarity here. There was the item conversions that rare monsters have in Path of Exile 1, where I was confident that a number of them still paid attention to player rarity, and it was actually tested. In 3.20 there was a stealth change that was made where a lot of those conversions stopped caring about player rarity at all, and that was done without me knowing about it. And then I had no idea that it was there until I think it was Snoobay that proved that I was wrong on it. And so I'd gone as far as put out a video asserting that it worked a certain way, and then had to put out a correction to it after the fact, because it was like, yeah, actually, no, here's the proof. And it was something that had been data mined all that time ago. But with rarity, I think the one saving grace that it's got is the game lies to you about the amount of that you've got, and you've got a lot less. If the game tells you you've got 65% fire resist, you have 65% fire resist. If the game tells you have 175% rarity, you have less than 175% rarity. The game just lies to you about the amount you've got. And that makes this awful system less bad than it would be otherwise, because it has less impact than it does. There's a diminishing returns formula that's not known. It's pretty steep, and it took a long time for this to get proven. But that means that the one saving grace is that the game is just flagrantly lying to you about it. Your character sheet tells you you've got an amount of rarity, you don't have that amount, and that's better than if if you actually had the amount that it said you did, because then it would just be terrible mechanic.
I'm kind of curious what you guys think about because I've been just focusing on testing mechanics out and things like that, and I'm so interested in like mechanics in PoE 2 versus PoE 1. What do you guys think about like them changing some of these mechanics around? For example, chaos damage in PoE 1 bypasses energy shield, right? And then you need to kind of solve that. But in PoE 2, it removes twice as much of the resource from energy shield if it deals damage to energy shield. And then you've got poison, which deals chaos damage but bypasses energy shield in PoE 2. What do you guys think about them like changing these mechanics around? And do you think it really, like, does it really make any sense for them, like for those changes, or do you think it already made sense in PoE1 and this is another case of them like changing something for the sake of changing it? Like, is there a solid foundation behind those changes, or do you think that it's just for it to be different?
I think it's both. I think they're changing stuff for the sake of changing it, so it's different from PoE1. But I also think that they're changing a lot of these mechanics in PoE2 to be as they thought they should be in PoE1. Like a great example is the well, right? I think maybe with chaos damage and the like, that maybe that's how they think it should operate in PoE1, but they're too afraid to make that drastic of a change, so they're trying it out in PoE2. I think they're attempting that with a lot of different balance and design decisions in PoE2 right now. I think they're testing out a ton of stuff, which is also why I'm so curious why they're treating this game like it's fully out and released as well. I think that's one of the most puzzling things, and one of the things that I hope that they go back on. I know they've taken official stance on, okay, we're basically going to treat this like a full release, but it's not a full released game. Like we've been sitting here for now an hour and 34 minutes, you guys. And even though we all started it, yeah, we're hyped about playing PoE2, 0.2, here we go. We have been talking about the problems the game has, right? And it's probably because we've been steaming on this for like 3.5 months. I think a lot of us, especially myself, I will admit it, I was blinded, especially those first few weeks. I was just like, oh my God, it's so good. And I really enjoy it right now. But the more I have played, the more I have experienced like the flaws the game has with balance, with these design decisions and all the rest, right? I think we're all very passionate about the game, and we want GGG to be making these changes that they pitched they were going to be making at a rapid pace, and they've decided against that, right? I feel like that's one of the biggest problems that we have facing us right now, is that they're too afraid to take that stance, because I think Path of Exile 2 blew the hell up, and they did not expect it to blow up that much, right? And now they have this huge player base. Lots of people get upset if something is changed, and they have to move around their build after. I can use myself as an example. If I work all week and I come back and I log in after not playing all week, and then my character's just, I don't know, much weaker than before, will I be upset? Probably, but I will also be mature enough to know this is an early access game. Stuff's gonna go down constantly, right? So I feel like, I don't know. That was a bit of a rant. But I
get what you mean.
I feel like that's the big thing,
I think you're on point on that, Ron.
Yeah, you're on point. It feels like GG always, they always had such a firm stance. And even when it was them against the entire community, they would have their reasons and they would do things a certain way. And often what would happen is, in the long term, the game would be better for it. Not always, but majority of the time. Whereas often now it gets this feeling where it's just like, I don't know why they're doing this way. They're not justifying it, and they're not communicating why they're doing it that way. And when people ask, they don't seem to know why. So I think that's like a major. It just feels, I don't know if you feel it, but it just feels different now. Things just feel different.
It is different.
It is.
Yeah, it is different.
It is literally different. Yeah, it's not just that it feels different. They kind of say one thing, do the other, which is kind of, that's basically like right before launch. I think there was an interview. I don't remember exactly. Forgive me for I can't remember exactly whose interview this was, but I remember Jonathan. I think it was Jonathan who said the exact words that updates to PoE2 were going to come thick and fast. That was the wording, thick and fast. Okay, well. Where is it then? Right?
Yeah, it feels.
Because the Herald of Ice.
Because this is we're going to be 4 months into early access by the time 0.2 comes around, and there isn't, like, we had some balance changes at the start, and we had some hot fixes to bugs and things, and that was about it.
Yeah. Do you think it's just that the scope of it is bigger now, and they're worried about just backlash?
Actually, I think the scope is continuously, Yeah, I think the scope is actually continuously creeping behind the scenes as well. Like we're already seeing it with the timelines right now. They literally said on the 19th of February that they were going to release 0.2 in a month. It's already gone to 6 weeks. Within the space of like 3-4 weeks, it's already gone to 6 weeks, right? Yeah. Like it's I think it's just ballooning out of control in the background. Like literally.
Yeah, I think One
Go
of the
for it,
things
Kyle.
we've got listed down is the stuff about as a talking point is the stuff around last Epoch. I reckon that Grinding Gear Games originally always intended the 21st of March to be the release date for 020.
Yeah.
And they had
Mhm.
project management issues that meant that they missed that. And that would have worked well. That wouldn't have clashed with last Epoch too badly. It wouldn't have clashed at all with Diablo 4. And it also wouldn't have had that situation where you've got 3 public holidays. So you've got Good Friday, you've got Easter Monday, and then you've got the New Zealand equivalent of Veterans Day, Anzac Day on the Friday after Easter Monday. So you've got 3 public holidays soon after launch. There is no way they want to be doing a release any later than the 5th of April, and not even really on the 5th of April. I'm saying the 5th because I'm Australian,
Yeah.
but it's 4th for a lot of you. And there is no way they want to be as late as they are. They cannot go later, but I think that they've been forced to it by slippage and internal planning. But I think that the last few months would have been so much better if they had fixed the egregious balance issues. Even if they didn't get it perfect, even if Archmage was still the strongest thing to do offensively in the game, and Herald of Ice was the best damage projection in the game, and Grim Feast was the best recovery in the game, they needed to nerf those things months ago. And the failure to do that has really made the game drag for the last 3 months. And they need to reverse this and just go, okay, here's our new promise. If we screw up on balance, what we'll do is we'll nerf the appropriate things, and we'll also provide free respecs to characters that are affected, so that you don't end up with the situation they had early on, where there was the high respec friction.
Yes.
Caused a lot of people that were in Cast on Critical Strike hell to be not Cast on Crit. It was
Cast on
Freeze.
Freeze.
That was the thing that was really broken
Yeah.
early on that they nerfed. And people who were in that, who got into respec hell as a result of that, the only way they could really bail themselves out was trading for a quad tab of rare items on TFT in order to then vendor them and get some gold that way. If they'd given those people free respecs instead, and then suddenly you have this situation where they can still play the game, they're not as salty about the nerf, and then you can still do the other nerfs that were needed, and then you can actually test. We've had no balance testing because beyond the start, it was just those first things.
And what is that going to do? That is going to massively expand the length of like early access and this weird period that we're in, where some people are like, is it a beta or is it just early access? I still get people like asking me about that when it is so obviously a big beta test, but they are treating it as a full release. And so many people are tricked into this. Not tricked, but they think, oh, I'm buying cosmetics for the game. Oh, there's so many people playing the game. Oh my God. Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. Man, that's crisp. A lot of this stuff feels really good. And then there's so many different facets that you experience once you really get into, 200 plus hours, and maybe some people a lot earlier, where you realize a lot of stuff that needs work here. And especially with the balance. I just think the balance thing is just a travesty. I really do. That is the one thing that I can wish more than everything else that they completely reverse course on. I know that they released the statement, but I hope they change direction.
But that statement was so wishy-washy, man.
Mm-hmm.
Like it didn't really say anything. Like that's kind of what I've got from a lot of the communication.
And action though, like their actions speak that way too. Like they just didn't do anything. I mean, the last
I miss the days of balance Like I want to see them write a balance manifesto for PoE2. I want to see what they want to do with the game.
I loved reading those.
Because the thing is, I'm not actually, I'm not one way or the other. Like if the game was slowed down, I would like it. If the game was the same as PoE1, I'd like it.
Me too.
I don't really have one way or the other. But right now, it just feels like it's trying to be both, and it doesn't really have any firm direction. And whenever anybody asks them anything about, any kind of direction that they're going in, they don't have an answer either. Or at least they don't want to provide an answer, not one that's concrete. So what I'm thinking there is that, and this is kind of goes back to a lot of those developer interviews where they had questions, no real answer. Is it that they don't know? Like, is it that they don't actually know what they really want out of the game? Because they're kind of in this unknown territory at the moment. You have to remember that PoE1 was built up over many, many years of players like slowly coming to the game, and they're kind of building, and they're adding things, and they get that response over time, right? That slow kind of feedback that players like this. Okay, players didn't like that. We're not going to do that again. You know, they kind of keep, and they're like building up, and occasionally there's like a little okay, and then it kind of keeps going. With PoE2, they're starting up here. They're right up there, instantly, or higher, right? They're right up there, and now they're like, if we do this, are we going to go like that? Are we just going to nosedive? Like, is it that they're afraid of
it's like there's a
making
lack
their
of
position?
confidence. They always felt like this very, very confident approach, and that's missing. And when you are a player of a game where you feel the developer is confident, they know what they are doing, you are so much more willing to allow them to take risks than when it feels like they are doing things and just hoping that it will work. And your question of do they know what they are doing? And I've almost asked this question as jokingly in the past of do they realize what is good about Path of Exile 1? They must know what's good about Path of Exile 1 and whether or not it should be implemented in PoE 2. Or is it that they just threw enough stuff at the wall and then the good stuff stuck and they just got lucky? I don't want to think that, because they've been consistent enough over time that I'd like to believe that they know what they are doing. But this last few months, it has that feeling of like they're just hoping that it's going to be good instead of knowing that this will be good.
So
I think they throw a lot of stuff at the wall internally, and we only see the stuff that works.
Which is good. It's great. But I want them to throw stuff at the wall with confidence rather than just like, let's see what's good.
Whereas that's one of the things that I really enjoyed about their league releases in PoE1 was that, like, yes, they would, and I guess more recently they were like very highs and like very big highs and very low lows, right? Like you had Necropolis, absolutely terrible. You had Settlers, incredible, right? That's just an example of like the two different releases there. One that was extremely successful and people just loved it, and one that just missed on so many. It just missed, complete failure.
Necropolis is what you get if you ask Reddit to design a league. It's like let's have an extremely strong deterministic crafting system, the strongest deterministic crafting system that's ever existed, and let's also have a whole bunch of risk-reward mechanics, and let's throw it all together and see what happens. And that's exactly what we had. We had you get this situation where you can't fail upwards on your crafts. You can fail downwards, but you can't fail upwards. So if you're going to try and make something that's a 9 out of 10 item, you cannot hit a 9.1 out of 10. You can fail to hit the 9, but like you might be 70% to hit. And then that inability to fail upwards, I think, was the thing that killed Necropolis.
Yeah, and there was a lot of other things, right? I remember how bad the UI was, like the giant corpse UI just covering like half of your screen. There's like on-death effects behind it. You can't see them. I mean, like the corpses taking up all of your inventory space. I mean, like there were so many things that were just not good about Necropolis. But like, what I was trying to make the point there is that there has been leagues, the last sort of 5, 6, 7 leagues. There's been some highs, there's been some lows. I mean, Crucible is another low, but then we had Sanctum, which was really, really good. I love Tota personally. I know that was a pretty successful league overall for them in terms of player retention and stuff. The reason why I want to bring that up is because they often took risks with leagues, big risks.
Yep.
And sometimes it just didn't work, right? But to get those really high highs, you have to take risks. I think no one's going to disagree with that, right? You have to just take those risks because you can't really overachieve without actually, you're always just going to get mediocre leagues if you just constantly play it safe and always go back for what people have already said is good.
So what I'm really curious about. So they cooked Path of Exile 2, for what, 6 years since 2018. Essentially, they've been working on this, probably 2017. They've had this idea in their heads of a more methodical ARPG with all the cool systems that made Path of Exile great over all these years. Jonathan, Mark, all the developers, they're working, in the shadows, right? They showcased it at 2019 a little bit. They go dark for 2 years. Then they showcase it at 2021. 2023, they showcase it again. A few people get to play it. And then they go dark for another basically year. And then in 2024, right, they start exposing it to more people. And I'm wondering if that, and obviously it releases too, did their plan not survive contact with the players or like the enemy, that saying, right? Wherein their plan was always to make this super next generation ARPG. No one's ever seen anything like this before. We want all the combat encounters to be methodical, boss fights in every map. Oh my gosh, it's going to be so good. But then when we get our hands on it, we break it instantly. Not even, the game is over, right? We completely demolish everything. We find all the tools available to crush everything. Are they now realizing that their dream that they've been playing for the past like 4 or 5 years is just not really possible in the environment that like the ARPG genre has become and the player base that they've curated, that Diablo 4, Last Epoch, all these different things they've curated before. And now are they like grappling with that decision of whether to push forward with PoE 1.5 or really nerf by 90%? And completely change the way things work. Because like Dreamcore, going back to the beginning of the chat about layouts, the layouts make a lot more sense if you're not zooming through them, right? If you're like, okay, here's corridor fight number 1 with all these rare monsters, right? That's not what's happening though, right? We're just blowing it up one at a time, one pack at a time, right? I don't know. I think that's a curious thing to think about.
I mean, possibly yes, but I think it's probably more so that, as you said, the game kind of took off and it has become more popular than even they could have expected.
Yeah.
And perhaps now there's kind of this question internally, is because you got to remember GG's a business; they need to make money,
right?
So is there kind of this question internally of what do we actually want PoE 2 to be because of the player base that it's attracted,
right?
So that there is that kind of difficult question that has to be posed. Like, you kind of want, the thing that I'm concerned about is if they try to please everyone, they're going to turn a lot of people away.
Please don't do this.
Right?
Yes.
So
that's the Blizzard approach.
Yeah, exactly. That is exactly the Blizzard
piss some people off. Do it.
I just want them to go one way or the other. I just want, and I want them to be like firm on it, man. Just go for it. Like that's what I miss about. I don't want to kind of bring it up and put it down on the conversation. But Chris Wilson, I never whenever I heard the guy talking, I never doubted that he didn't just have a direction that he wanted.
Yeah,
it wasn't ever like flippy floppy. This guy was just. You asked him a question, he just give it to you straight. Like,
I'll squash your dreams.
Anytime there was some kind of thing that he disagreed with, he told you why he disagreed with it. He's not going to like try to agree with you. He's just going to tell you, this is why I think it's bad. It doesn't matter if you disagree with it. Like, he's still telling you what he thinks. And you have to respect it, right? You just respect it because ultimately we have the game right now, the game that we all love. It came from that. It was born out of that system of here's the direction I'm going for, and some people might not like it, but we've gathered an audience this way. Yeah. So now it feels like they've got this bigger audience, but it's segmented, right? So you had a PoE 1 audience, which is like a quarter of the cake. Let's say it's like a quarter of the cake, right? Then you have the PoE 2 audience, which is like half the cake or 3/4. It's a lot bigger, but it's very segmented. There's like a bunch of people that want that slow, methodical gameplay. There's another bunch of people that want PoE 2 to just be PoE 1. There's some other people that are probably thinking it's something else. I mean, who knows, right?
It's crazy.
So, and right now, none of those people know what the game is going to become or anything. They don't know. They're going to log in on 0.2 and the game could be totally different. It might be something that they're not in, they don't like it anymore or whatever. Who knows? But we don't know right now. Because we've had no dialogue in that way.
Yeah, I think what would be the best outcome is if Path of Exile 1 is the wild ride and Path of Exile 2 is the more methodical gameplay aspect, if that's what they go for. I think that's the best outcome. But if they decide to go both games are a wild ride, then that could still be fun. But I feel like I'll probably end up playing less Path of Exile 2 as a result than I would otherwise.
And whatever they do decide on, as long as they have a firm perspective. The thing is, the moment you try and go middle ground, you end up with average, right? What's wonderful about Path of Exile 1 is that it is alienating to a lot of people, but at the same time, it is incredibly perfect to a lot of people. So it's what's the word? It's like polarizing.
It's polarizing.
Oh yeah, it is.
Yeah, people either log in and they say this is ridiculous. There's no way I'm gonna spend time learning this, or it becomes so
Your obsession.
integral to their life, yeah, that they make a job out of it, or it's their favorite game of all time. I'm not trying to say D4 bad, but D4 obviously it is trying to appeal to as many people as possible.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard someone say Diablo 4 is my favorite game? Diablo 4 is the greatest ARPG ever made. But you will hear people say Path of Exile is my favorite game. Path of Exile is the best RPG ever made. And people will say, I hate that game. That game sucks. That's what I want for Path of Exile too. People saying, I hate it, it sucks. And people saying, I love it, this is the best game ever. Not, it's okay. Like, I don't really, it's
Like,
all right. Like, no one says that about Path of Exile. They either love it or hate it.
People are doing that about the campaign, right? Like I hear people do it like
exactly.
at day one. Holy crap. People were logging out in like 20 minutes, or they were like,
good.
Yes. Oh.
Exactly. And that's fine, dude. Get out. Make a game that is made for certain people. Screw the majority. Make a good game. And that's what Path of Exile 1 has always been. It has been a game for certain people, and that's why it's so brilliant. I don't care
I
if
think
it
there's a
alienates
couple of real
people.
examples of this in other games.
Yeah.
One of them is EVE Online, back when that game was good. Okay, I don't recommend it anymore. It's gone into a pay-to-cheat mess now. It has been really for a few years. But back when it was good, it was a game that was very much, okay, you come to this game because you want a ruthless PvP experience that you are never safe when you're interacting with another player. And in that sense, it's just this high-tension environment. That is the appeal of EVE back when EVE was good. Then there's other games that can be perfect for a very different audience, like Farmville. Farmville is an example. Okay, I'm showing my age here because I was 30 when it came out, I think. But Farmville was one of those things that has zero appeal to me, but that if you're just wanting to chill out after work and do something completely mindless, it was perfect for that audience. If you try to create a game that has elements of EVE Online and Farmville together, you are going to create a horrible amalgam of terrible mechanics that is going to not appeal to anyone. Likewise, Dark Souls, all of that franchise, really good games because they're like, here's our market segment. We've identified this market segment. We're going to make something perfect for them. And it's not going to be perfect for everyone. It's going to be a terrible game for a lot of people, but that's perfectly fine.
Yeah,
and
that's what made those games special, right? Another good example of that is New World. Like, you guys remember when New World was going to be a hardcore PvP MMO?
Yeah.
It was going to be, you could claim land, and anyone who comes on your land, you could charge them rent, and if they don't pay, you can kill them on site, right? And then when they die, they lose their gear, right? Like, that's crazy. That sounded amazing. And then they just completely walked back everything and was like, okay, guys, we're just going to make the most bland MMO. We're going to use features that everybody's already done to death before. Nothing's going to be new.
Yep.
Just, that's it. Like, that was it. And once again, yes, okay, the game probably made a good amount of money at launch, made a lot of sales. But we go back to that thing with PoE 1. How it's been successful and how it stayed alive all that time is that it has garnered that audience that has stuck with it, because it is appealing to that specific niche of players. Yeah. And it constantly pleases that player base, and new people come along and want to play it, right? And that player base, even though it's smaller, right, way smaller than like Diablo or anything like that, way smaller, but it's enough. I mean, if you go back to some of those Chris interviews where he was talking about developing the game, and he was talking about how you only need, I can't remember how many players 10, it was now. It might have been 10,000, right?
10,000, yep.
So, you know, PoE's got way more than that, right? PoE 1 has had way more than that for a long time. And so, yeah, it's just one of those things. You kind of have to be polarizing as a successful game, especially in a live service model. You can't really appeal to everybody.
For anything, man. Think of all the biggest content creators. Like, they are all polarizing. People have opinions about these people, or anything that people engage with on like a deeper level are always engaging and they're polarizing and they're alienating to other people. Politics, same thing. It's like people have feelings because they care about it. The moment you try and go for mass appeal, it's just whatever. Like as a content creator, I'd rather someone say, oh, I hate that guy, I can't stand him, and other people saying I really like him, versus people saying yeah, he's all right. You know what I mean? That's just like who gives a shit? We allowed to swear, sorry. The one
Music, I
I
think, is the
slipped up.
best example there. Like you find that
Exactly, music.
if you were to take the four of us on this podcast, we probably have quite divergent music tastes. There'll be things that I like that you're like, oh, that's terrible, and vice versa. And you have the most successful artists tend to be the ones that find something that appeals to a lot of people, but they're also widely hated as well. You know, you think Ed Sheeran, Justin Bieber, Taylor Swift, three
Taylor
of the biggest
Swift.
artists of the 2010s.
I like Taylor Swift too.
And like of those three, you know, two of them I don't really have any time for at all, and the other one I think is reasonable. But if you ask around a bunch of people, you'll find a lot of people will be like, "Oh yeah, that was my favorite artist at the time," and then a lot of other people will be like, "Oh my god, will that person ever shut up?" And that's exactly what you want. You don't want to be the person that's mediocre to everyone, because then they're not going to buy your CD.
So
Yeah.
true,
Come to
Gog.
geek, at least.
And now,
Come to geek,
what
just-
what was the reasonable artist out of those three? It was Taylor Swift, right?
Sheeran's the one I prefer.
Ugh.
Oh, I can't
Taylor Swift
stand
has
Ed
a couple
Sheeran.
of
He makes me want
God.
to puke.
Man,
but that's
he had
what
one
that's
good
exactly
song.
what
One
I'm
good
more of a
song.
symphonic metal
I
person,
danced with
but,
my grandma too at my wedding. That's the only good song he has. Everything else is crap. Sorry.
But that's what we want, basically, is GGG saying we have a stance, we have a position. If you don't like it, we don't care. Get out of here. We've got enough people to support us. This is what we want our game to be, right? And I'm hoping that for 0.2.0, we get to see that when they are asked questions, they have answers to it, and they have positions, and they don't. You can tell when they answer questions currently, they're thinking about how people are going to respond to it. You can't do that. You have to just have
Well
your
said.
position. If people don't like it, go play one of the 7 billion other games. Like, who cares?
Well said, dude. Now we've been talking about, you know, all the things that we care about in Path of Exile 2 for the last 2 hours. I'm really curious, with 0.2 coming up, can I get a prediction from each of you guys? One thing that you think will be in the patch that has not yet been revealed. So it can't be the Huntress, can't be the Spear, can't be any of the uniques. What do you guys think might be coming in this patch that is substantial? Because I don't know about you guys, but we've been talking about how important this is because it's going to be responding to player feedback. But it's also the first update for Path of Exile 2 for all these new people who have never experienced a PoE expansion before. Remember, PoE 1 hasn't even had an expansion since July of last year. It's going to be an 11-month league. Oh my God.
It's going to be, I mean...
Is it going to be a 12-month league? They should just
that's
go
if
for a
you
year.
believe them, dude. That's if you believe them.
They should just go for a year.
I
Just
don't.
be like, all right.
I don't think it's going to... I don't...
doing fine as a 326, honestly, if they said, hey, this is going to be smaller in scope, and put out Freesia as a 326.
Oh, I was shocked they didn't do that.
I reckon.
After the reception, like, people absolutely love it. Like, I'm shocked. But like, this is going to be the first public grinding your games big content patch since PoE 2 has come out. And their audience, you know, you can love or hate PoE 2. It's way wider now. I feel like the impetus is on them to wow everybody. I think a lot of people are thinking it's going to be, you know, meager, and they're like, oh, it's just going to be the Huntress and some changes. I don't know, guys. I feel like it's going to be meaty. I know you guys don't disagree with the axe and you think they're going to focus on endgame. Whether they do that, one or the other, I think it's going to be substantial. I really do.
No, I think there is going to be Act 4.
You think so?
Yeah.
There we
Act
go.
4 endgame Huntress Druid.
I can't see Druid, man. I
Can't
just...
see Druid.
Why? Dreamcore, man.
Because, like, would you... Okay, let me just... Right.
We did this at the beginning.
Okay. I know we already did this. We already did it.
I didn't get to debate. I didn't get to do it.
Okay, but here's the thing, right?
Okay.
Like,
all right.
You're GGG, right? You're in charge of GGG right now. You're in charge of the marketing for 0.2. If you know that Druid is coming, do you tease Druid as the like thing to get people to tune into the reveal, or do you tease Huntress?
I tease Druid 1 week out, not 2 weeks out. I do Huntress 2 weeks out, Druid 1 week out.
But that's okay. So you're talking about doing a minor. That's a minor teaser. We're talking about this is the trailer of. This is the announcement of the announcement. Whenever GGG does things, the announcement of the announcement is the first like big thing, and then the reveal is the next big thing. All of those other teasers in between are just they're small things. They're like bit of quality of life thing here. Here's a unique item. Here's some like new. I don't know, some other thing. Like that's what it is, right? We're changing the graphics on essences, right? Like, you know.
That was a good one. Incrementally improving the sound design.
If you say so, dude. If you say.
No, that was sarcastic. That was.
But what I'm saying is, if you know that Druid's coming, are you not teasing Druid in the like announcement of the announcement? I don't know.
I'll
like,
tell you what I would do if I was in charge. I would put unambiguously that the Huntress, let's say it's the Huntress and the Druid and another class. Say it's the Huntress, the Druid, and the Duelist coming.
Stop.
I would put the Huntress and the Duelist in earlier. No, I'd put the Huntress and Duelist in earlier teasers, and I'd put a couple of things that maybe point towards there's a Druid maybe, but not make it unambiguous, and the clarification of the ambiguity would come in the live stream. Yeah. So you'd have a bit of online discussion about is there Druid, is there not Druid, which is already happening at the moment, but you would feed that a little bit. Like you'd have video footage of some new unrelated skill, and in that video footage, you would have someone fighting Wilds-themed enemies. And that would be the sort of thing that you'd do. You'd have an item that could be used by a Druid, but could be used by something else as well.
I hope you guys are right. I hope that the Druid is in this patch. Like, I really do hope so. I hope that I'm wrong.
Not sure. I'm just
thinking that, like, I don't know if they've got the balls to do that, like, teaser that's the Huntress, and then the in the full reveal, it's like, oh yeah, here's Druid, guys. Like, this is like, okay. With that said, they have done epic reveals in the past, like reveals.
Right?
Atlas Tree, like all that stuff was just crazy. Yep. Was so much fun. I am excited for the reveal either way, but I just think they would have teased the Druid and then be like, oh, and here's Huntress as well, and not the other way around. It's just like because it's that one big hook feature, right? It's like it kind of hooks you in. You're like, because they know they have to know that Druid is the most anticipated class. Like you look on any forums, any discussion about anything,
any try
everyone's
video.
always going on about Druid, right?
No, you're totally right. March 27th, you guys. It's going to be a big day, right? I feel like there's going to be a lot of weight on GGG that day. I think we're all going to be tuning in on Twitch, YouTube, wherever, participating in discussions about it. And now that you bring up the big announcements, they do like to do that, though. They like to surprise us. If they're going back to the GGG of ye olden days, right, of 2019 ExileCon, of Fall of Oriath, of the Atlas skill tree reveal, like maybe we're getting something really juicy, or maybe I'm just sniffing too much hopium. Well, you guys, this actually has been phenomenal. I cannot believe we've been talking for 2 hours, and I think we got through like 3 topics of like 15. So I feel like we meshed together pretty well. It was really great, you guys. I really appreciated all the discussions. Did anybody have anything else they wanted to briefly chat about regarding Path of Exile 2, or we good to call it here?
Can I ask people's opinion on the helmet that was teased? That I feel if this thing is as rare as Trementus, it's going to be a super chase item. And my initial thoughts were that it was just a good item and maybe even marginal, but I think I was wrong.
Yeah, it's extremely good.
I think it's one of the most powerful items in the game. And the value of it's going to depend whether it's Astromentus rarity or whether it's common. If it's common, it'll just be like the Everlasting Gaze. It'll be like, oh yeah, it's a divine for a while. But what do you think about it?
So, yes, it is extremely strong. Like, it's mega strong. Those nodes on the tree are crazy. If the nodes on the tree don't get changed, then that helmet is really, really good. I wonder where it drops from, though. Like, I think it might be a boss drop.
From a tower.
From the new pinnacle?
It could be, as Lolcohol said, it could be a tower drop. Like, it only drops from tower map bosses. That's possible, right? It's called the deepest tower. There could be something going on there, right? They're adding tower map bosses, so maybe it's something to do with that. That would be pretty cool.
So good. That's a good one.
But also, I think the more logical one is that it's an Arbiter drop. Because when you go into the Arbiter fight, you go down. It's the deepest tower, right? You go down into the ground, like that's. And
Or
also the art.
delve.
I think the art of it is kind of
That's some big
Arbiter
brain.
looking. So
That's some
Yeah.
big
Arbiter
brain.
has a really good loot pool already, though. Like it's.
it does.
Juice 'em up,
It does,
baby.
that's true.
Juice them
I
up
feel
even
like
more.
adding-
Come on.
it
But
would
they
feel like
might
adding a
want to
new item
release some of
Nova.
the stuff off of Arbiter. Like they might not be happy with some of the drops, so maybe they'll change it up.
Oh yeah, maybe they'll space it out.
But I definitely prefer it as a boss drop rather than a random drop.
World
I
drop.
think
Yeah.
because that item is very very build defining. Like for those builds on the bottom of the tree that can reach those clusters,
Yep.
it is extremely powerful. Like
yeah.
it will single-handedly carry all of your increased damage on the build, and you can spec into like a bunch of other stuff. Like it is crazy damage.
Yeah, I watched your guys'
Execute
videos
40%
on
more
it, and I was like,
damage.
"Oh, whoa, that's busted!" I did not realize that at all. So
Yeah,
That's
it's really
that's
strong.
cool. That's actually a very interesting form of scaling that we haven't really seen before. Treating all enemies and then building around. Treating all
Yeah.
enemies as low life and then building around that versus scaling crits or whatever. I think it's interesting.
100%.
Yeah, and the other thing is that if you're using a weapon that has 40 to 160% damage range, like all crossbows except Act 1 crossbows have 40 to 160% damage range, there's a node on the passive tree that's in that cluster that is your damage is lucky against enemies with low life if it's hits. That is 20% more damage if you're doing 40 to 160 damage. If you're doing like 25 to 175, I don't know if there's anything that scales quite that much, but that'd be 25% more. But basically, the formula is that you normally deal 100% damage, but if you've got lucky, you deal the minimum plus twice the maximum. You take the average of those three.
Yeah,
I won't go
that
into
is
calculus of
really
why that's
strong
the
and
case,
noticeable.
but if you've got a calculus background, you'll recognize why that's the case.
Going to be absolutely busted, you guys, just like the next Path of Exile 2 patch. Once again, thank you all for tuning in to this first Mobalytics podcast, the Pod of Exile. And I know 3 out of the 4 of us are sick, so good job soldiering on. And Sirgog, you woke up early today, very early. We really appreciate you, man. All right, any last words? Or peace out, you guys. Stay sane.
Yeah. Stay sane, everyone. Have a lovely evening, morning, day, whatever time
And
it
stay
is.
sane is only a recommendation. You don't need to do it.
True. It's very, very true. We are Path of Exile 2 and 1 players after all. All right, everybody. Have a wonderful night. Thank you so much for tuning in. Stay sane.
Take care.
Farewell.
Bye-bye.